You're welcome back to Sunday Sequence. Religion and politics, not to mention terror and bloodshed, have merged together in a volatile mix over the past few weeks, following the attack on Charlie Hebdo and the subsequent worldwide publication of its controversial Survivors edition. But is religion given too little or too much respect? Are so-called religious rights and freedoms underprotected or overprotected in today's modern and democratic societies? Well, with us this morning is a panel of commentators from various faiths and indeed none. We're joined by Dr. Usama Hassan, senior researcher at the London-based think tank Quilliam, which focuses on anti-extremism. We're also joined by Rabbi Jonathan Romain, Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland, and Peter Lynas from the Evangelical Alliance is with us. You're all very welcome indeed to Sunday Sequence. As we heard the Pope in recent days, Peter Lynas said that one cannot make fun of faith. Every religion has its dignity. Do you agree?
I do agree. I think, though, probably the Pope is talking to his own followers at that point, so I don't think he's trying to prescribe the law. We need to have respect. There's been a lot of talk around freedom to tell the truth and also freedom to cause offence. And ultimately, I believe the law allows you to do both. And Christianity is probably one of the most mocked religions in the world. It started right back with Jesus, and it continues to be the case.
And does that offend you?
Some things that I see I find offensive, but I don't think they should be banned for that reason. And I'm pretty sure Pope Francis was talking about his own followers. I don't want to exercise my right to cause offence to other people unnecessarily. Now, I want to push back sometimes and say, I disagree, I think you're wrong, I don't think your argument's tenable. But at the same time, I'm not openly looking to cause offence to produce mocking material. So there's a difference between the right to tell the truth and to cause offence, and there's also a difference between what we as Christians or followers of Christ should do, which is not to try and cause offence, but also what the law might allow. So David Cameron's rightly said, look, the law may have different limitations and allow people to cause offence to each other within the boundaries of that law, but that's not something we as Christians would seek to do to offend other people.
Do you support a blasphemy law?
No, I've been asked about that this week, and I've said I wouldn't have an objection if such a law was abolished. Now, it seems to exist only in Northern Ireland. It's a curious hangover from some of our older legislation.
It exists in the Republic as well, of course.
Yes, sorry, the Republic has a different and a newer manifestation of that, but Northern Ireland is a hangover from when there was an established church, so it's questionable as to if it even exists in real terms, because it was really only the established church that you could blaspheme against and their understanding of what it was to be a Christian. So, but getting beyond that, it's not used. It hasn't been used, I don't think, in this century, perhaps once in Northern Ireland. God doesn't need human beings to defend him. The reality is, if you believe in a real divine God, he doesn't need us to do that. But also in a plural society where there are a variety of views, then other groups may be defended by such a law. And Pakistan has used the Irish blasphemy laws to try and defend its position on blasphemy. And the reality is that, in simple terms, the Bible has two sets of laws. I would say universal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. That applies to everybody. But there are also specific laws for God's people. You need to give 10% back if you're a follower of God. You don't take the Lord's name in vain. Those are internal laws, if you like, for those who follow Jesus.
OK, let me bring in Dr. Usama Hassan. Dr. Hassan, you're very welcome, and thank you for taking part in our programme this morning. Religion is a set of ideas, and therefore shouldn't ideas be open to ridicule?
Yes, absolutely. I agree entirely with what our Christian friend has just said. The balanced Muslim position and the principled Muslim position would be very similar. Religion is more than just a set of ideas, of course. It's also beliefs, it's practices, very importantly. It's a lot of symbolism, and it's the depth and the experience, which is why millions of people, the majority perhaps around the world, take religion very seriously. But yes, like any other claims, truth claims or otherwise, whether it's science or religion or philosophy or any other kind of ideology, we have to be open to debate and discuss, etc. The whole issue of taking offence is sometimes, I think, misunderstood. The freedom to offend. There is a freedom to offend, of course, as part of free speech. A lot of offence is actually unintentional. So, I might say something from a Muslim perspective which people who are not Muslim find offensive by its nature, and likewise for other religion. But the intention shouldn't be to offend for people who follow that moral code. But of course, we can't force that on other people. I think the intention is quite important, but that's something that we can't force. And what I mean there is civilized people do not intentionally go out and try to cause maximum offence to others. And sometimes we make a mistake in the free speech debate to celebrate people who are offensive as some kind of hero of the free speech, and I think that's very wrong, actually.
But one person's
they
insult...
have the right to do that. They have the right to do that. They shouldn't, as civilised people, go out intentionally to do that.
But one person's insult is another person's legitimate critique.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and we have to be civilised and debate about it. And you can always tell in a debate, in a discussion, if somebody is trying to make an honest, sincere point, legitimately arguing their point of view, which others may find offensive, but that person doesn't mean it. And others who are, intentionally out to offend other people on purpose. And I think that's a big difference in the space of civilised debate, which is a distinction which I think needs to be maintained.
And Rabbi Jonathan Romain, in terms of blasphemy, is it an issue in Judaism?
It shouldn't be. I mean, blasphemy, as I think our previous speakers have already established, is blasphemy is in the eye of the beholder, or the mind of the beholder, and therefore it's impossible to legislate. And yes, it may be upsetting if someone's offensive, but I do believe that people have the right to be offensive. They don't have the right for that to then spill over into violence. That's the dividing line. And actually, sometimes religious satire or rudeness can be quite helpful, because it can often expose failings that people want to cover up, whether it's sort of rogue rabbis or paedophile priests or horrible humanists. And actually, on the contrary, if something offensive really doesn't hit the mark, it just falls flat and it just sort of rebounds on the source. And the other extraordinary thing, of course, is we're talking about religious satire offence. It's actually in the Bible itself. I'm sure many of your listeners will be familiar with the Book of Kings, where Elijah is having a sort of a battle, a sort of a dispute with the prophets of Baal. They're praying to Baal, nothing happens, and he goads them, and he says, look, why don't you shout louder? Maybe your God's gone to the loo, maybe your God's fallen asleep. Shout louder, try and wake him up. So that's religious satire at its best, and we don't object to that.
But is blasphemy in Judaism, it may not be an issue, but is it called something else? Is it called antisemitism?
No, not. I mean, anti-Semitism is different in that there you're attacking someone's race, which you can't change, whereas blasphemy is attacking their views, whether it's religious or political, and therefore it's not ad personam, it's against the idea. And I think all ideas, religious, political, personal, whatever, have to be open to scrutiny. And if they are so fragile that blasphemy hurts them, well, then it shows they probably weren't the best idea in the first place.
Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland. Michael, you're welcome to Sunday Sequence as well. Going back to what the Pope said this week, every religion has its dignity. One cannot make fun of faith. If you curse my mother, expect a punch. What do you make of that?
Well, it's kind of strange. I mean, I think that we shouldn't cause harm to people, including punching them, by infringing on their human rights, but that we should always be able to robustly criticise and ridicule ideas. Now, the Pope said two things. He said that you can't insult religious beliefs, and also that you can't make fun of them. Now, in terms of insulting, I mean, the Catholic Church itself can be quite provocative and insulting about other people's dearly held beliefs. The Christian Bible says that Jews are of their father, the devil. The Catholic Church's position that homosexuality is a moral disorder. There are a range of things that the Catholic Church says that it knows are offensive to other people, yet it seems happy to say them. In terms of the making fun of faith, I mean, that's just a silly thing to say. Of course you can make fun of faith. I mean, most people who are of traditional religions will have no problem making fun of the idea that David Icke believes that he is God and that George Bush was an alien space lizard. They'll realise that belief is a silly belief. And the reason that many religious beliefs need this type of artificial protection from ridicule is that the beliefs are literally ridiculous. They don't stand up to scrutiny. If they stood up to scrutiny in the same way that other beliefs have to, then they wouldn't need this artificial protection. Do
you agree with that, Peter Lynas?
No, I think, atheism is a really interesting case in point. I mean, it is a belief that there is no God, which is, actually, as I look at it, is fairly ridiculous, to use Michael's language. There's no transcendent higher force. Where does any foundational idea come from? Where does any moral value judgment come from? So we have to be careful how we express that. So atheism sits in the range of religions in this conversation. The other thing we have to remember is the Judeo-Christian heritage of the country in which we sit. So our legal system, our whole welfare system, schools, hospitals, so many of those pieces come from our strong Judeo-Christian heritage, the inherent dignity of the person, the rule of law, the divine appointment of government. So your understanding has to be framed in that, and that's very different actually than what's happened in France, is the laicity, as they like to call it, this extreme secularism that pushes any religion from the public square, and it's fundamentally anti-freedom. And France, to some extent, seems to be reaping some of the consequence of that, of saying, they chased out the Catholic Church. They went well beyond, not just taking and confiscating property, but eradicating anybody who had a belief in God. And Giles Fraser has a very interesting piece in The Guardian this week about that. But fundamentally, that moves from sort of a neutral public space they're trying to proclaim to no religion allowed, and that's anti-freedom, because a third of people in Northern Ireland go to church every week. Only 20% say they never go to church. So religion obviously has a key part within our society.
But religion is not banned in France, Peter.
No, but there is essentially an exclusion from the public square.
Well, it's a separation of church and state.
No, the laicity, that key concept, is actually to go further than that and essentially allow, say, schools, for example, cannot have produce burgers, halal meat. There's a banning of that. You cannot wear your hijab in public spaces. And so Muslim and Jewish kids can either eat pork or go hungry, was what was said about the school in Sarge-le-Lamen. And that's an extreme form that says, no, we're not even going to countenance the different views that you have on this issue. We're banning the notion of even having no pork on the menu. So that's very extreme, and that's what we need to be really careful about, because religion has strongly influenced our society, and for the better, I would say. But
Dr. Hassan, is it time perhaps to lessen how strong that influence religion has been on society? Surely mustn't it come back to a personal belief and a personal choice?
It's time for all of these matters to be debated, especially around Islam in Muslim-majority countries, because somebody's mentioned the Pakistan blasphemy laws, which I think are appalling, and certainly used appallingly. And of course, given the problems in Europe and France, especially this week, we have to renegotiate that. But no, I don't accept that religion is only personal. In the nature of all the major world religions, they are communal as well. And in fact, Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights not only protects people's rights to follow their religion and have freedom of belief, but also to manifest the practice of their religions publicly. And that's something which is often forgotten. And I agree with Peter there that France has perhaps gone much too far in being vehemently anti-religion and stopping the expression of religion and manifestation of religion in the public space, which is actually against the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, something which is often forgotten. So certainly there has to be this discussion between religion and its space in civic society, and a kind of neutral secularism which treats all religion or non-faith equally. So we negotiate how we come together in the public square is important. But the public square itself, ideas of welfare and the common good, etc., many of them came from religion. A lot of modern humanism came from religious humanism. So we can't ignore the role of religion in public matters.
Mm-hmm. Rabbi Jonathan Romain, what do you say to that?
Well, yes, I think religion is a private matter, and therefore it shouldn't have any special pleading. It is, and in a sense, it has to accept something that it's been used to be having a special pedestal. I'm religious, I value my faith and that of others, but I have to accept it shouldn't have a special protexia. And actually, just to quote another faith, the Mormons, who I don't often praise, I think got it spectacularly right in their reaction. You may remember the Book of Mormon, which was a sort of musical which was on show all over the place, and which they were horrified at because it lampooned Mormonism. But what did they do? They didn't stand out in the streets and scream. They didn't persecute the actors. What they did, very cleverly, was they took out a full-page advert in the programme that all the theatre-goers read every night when they saw the play, and the advert said, "Look, you've seen the performance, now come to one of our churches and spot the difference." And I think that was a mature religious response.
Michael Nugent, isn't it more difficult perhaps on this island, north and south, because religion, and indeed in many other parts of the Muslim world as well, religion is so caught up with identity. So when perhaps you insult someone's religion, it's not just a belief system or a faith that you're insulting their very being.
Well, I think it's both that it's tied up with identity, but also tied up with politics. I mean, in the UK, you have the Queen and the House of Lords have religious influence. In Ireland, the President and judges and the Taoiseach have to swear a religious oath in order to take office. You have state-funded religious schools in both jurisdictions. You don't have state-funded schools, promoting socialism or libertarianism or homeopathy or UFOs or any other beliefs that people have. You have the blasphemy laws. You have, as you say, you have the the Vatican is kind of treated as if it's a state, whereas it's actually the only really, it's actually the head of a religion is what the Vatican is, and it's treated as if it's an actual state. So all of these hidden privileges that if you reversed them would immediately be obviously wrong. If hypothetically the Queen had to be an atheist, or the President of Ireland had to swear an oath that there's no God, or their schools were actively teaching that there is no God, people would immediately realise that that's wrong. And so you've got all that sort of background noise of desensitisation to religious privilege, and that is what creates this problem. Really, we should be judging beliefs on the basis of their content and their testability, not on the basis of their alleged source.
Dr. Hassan, what do you make of that point and the argument that the sensitivity towards offence by some religions, it's more of a case of religious nationalism than true faith?
Yes, that's often the case. And when some religious communities feel marginalised or victimised or under threat, then they're likely to be even more sensitive. And I think Muslims in Western Europe are a good case in point, because there are millions of Muslims in Western Europe, and the vast majority are from immigrant backgrounds and have experienced constant racism for the last 40 or 50 years. I mean, I grew up experiencing racism in Britain in the 70s and 80s, and that can make people much more sensitive, which is partly why the Rushdie affair in the 80s was so problematic for British Muslims, because satire and criticism seemed to come from the rest of society, or somebody from a Muslim background, in that case Salman Rushdie, who was very well integrated into the rest of society but had lost his faith or left his faith. And this was perceived as an attack on an already victimised and marginalised community. And so when it gets mixed up with racism, etc., religious nationalism is often a response. And I think there's some of that which has happened in France, unfortunately. Some of the terrorists and extremists have come from broken homes or felt excluded or marginalised in society.
That's a fair point, isn't it, Peter? Because I was reading a quote from a French Muslim over the last week who said that religion is all we have left, suggesting that it's politics rather than theology which is at the root of it. And it doesn't just apply to Muslims. Christians feel this very strong sense of nationalism and identity too, linked to religion. Peter.
Yes, certainly, Audrey, the identity point, absolutely. I mean, this is fundamental to who I am. It's absolutely at the core of who I am. I've dedicated my entire life to follow Jesus Christ. So it is my core identity, and that'll be the case for many Christians. Now, in terms of the privilege, though, into society and our role, I think there's a sense at which Christians somehow have some great rights or privilege. Within Northern Ireland, there are very few carry-on privileges, but what there is that they are the people who do stuff. The Faith and Community report in Wales showed the value of what Christians contribute. They won't even do such a report in Northern Ireland because it's considered so obvious. You know, who runs the food banks, the Christians Against Poverty, who's engaged in schools, who runs parent and toddler groups and visits the elderly. Christians are involved because the archbishops came out and said we need to see welfare reform here, we need to see a changed economy. That's, Archbishop Welby and Sentamu. Christians don't just demand privilege, they are the people doing stuff, and they speak into the public square. My question is, this growing band of atheists, what organisations are they running? Where are they on human trafficking and all these campaigns that Christians are at the forefront of running? We look for freedom for the other. So we're speaking up not to say give us rights, it's to say the economy is failing and there are some problems. We need a better welfare support system. We need to do something about human trafficking. Lord Morrow said his bill was influenced by his Christian faith. That to me seems to be very positive. Not use of privilege, but use of his core identity and beliefs to transform law on behalf of the other. And that's right, and that's what faith should do. So there's a huge band of Christians here who are doing stuff because that's what their faith demands of them. It's not a privilege, it's who we are.
Michael Nugent, where are the atheists?
Well, there are many secular charities around the world. The Red Cross is a secular charity. Doctors Without Frontiers is a secular charity. There are many explicitly atheist charities that have been set up in recent years. Atheist Ireland raises money for charity on an ongoing basis. Atheist Ireland has a strong ethical stance on issues like we will only hold our events in places that are disability accessible. We try to be as inclusive as possible of different types of people in our events and organisations. The idea that atheists somehow are borrowing from religion when we're acting ethically is actually the other way around from reality. Ethics are based on natural human evolved attributes like empathy and compassion and cooperation and reciprocity and fairness and justice. And religion tries to create the impression that these are religious attributes. They're not. They're human attributes that everybody does. And religion, if it does anything, it corrupts these natural attributes by telling people that there are circumstances where, even though something is the compassionate thing to do, you shouldn't do it because somebody wrote something in a book 2,000 years ago.
Compassion is fundamentally at odds with Darwinianism. How does a random collection of cells evolve a sense of justice? It takes a transcendent external being.
I'll tell you why. Because cooperation is as useful as competition to species managing to be the ones that succeed in procreation.
I want to move it back to our focus for the discussion in terms of, is religion given too little or too much respect? Are some religions overprotected than others? And Dr. Usama Hassan, in the last number of weeks, because of what took place in Paris, there's a lot of talk that Islam is too well protected. Is Islam overprotected in today's society? Does it receive more protections perhaps than other religions?
No, not at all. If you'd read blogs and the comments on leading broadsheet newspapers in this country, for example, I would suggest that Islam is the most attacked and ridiculed religion and insulted religion. Muslims have to read a lot of very kind of, if you like, hurtful attacks on Islam, so we don't see it that way at all. But what we have to argue for is to continue this negotiation of the place of religion in the modern world, especially in Western Europe, which is becoming more and more secular. I mean, it's the Church of England, which is the established church, here where I'm sitting in London, and have bishops guaranteed in the House of Lords, etc. Is that a good thing or not? Those are the issues that I think need to be negotiated.
But Dr. Hassan,
and within Islam for centuries, the Muslim empires had a different range of approaches to that relationship between religion and state.
Mm-hmm. And you say, Dr. Hassan, that Islam is the most ridiculed, most critiqued religion, most insulted religion of the last number of decades. But who is responsible for that? You mentioned earlier on about the Pakistan blasphemy laws. We have what's happening in Saudi Arabia at the moment against the blogger. When states carry out punishments like that because their religion has been insulted, aren't they responsible for creating the insults and creating the ridicule and the criticisms?
They're partly responsible, of course, but those states have been supported by Western powers who've known about this for decades and have kept absolutely quiet on this. So it's a collective human issue that we have to deal with these issues around the world.
But from Muslims as well, I know they're not a homogenous group, but Muslims in general, do they support the state-sanctioned punishments for blasphemy like we're witnessing in Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi Arabia, there's an increasing reform movement, and Raif Badawi, the blogger, is being flogged. He's a devout Muslim, and so is his wife and family. Mm-hmm. And so there are a growing reform movement. I've written on abolishing blasphemy laws and reforming these ideas. The Ottoman state got rid of the old laws on apostasy in the mid-19th century. There are millions of Muslims who are passionate about reform and wish to recapture the original spirit of Islam, which is compassion, mercy. Every chapter of the Quran, except one, begins with the formula of mercy. God is essentially mercy and compassion, and it's that's the basis of the compassionate Muslim worldview on all of these matters. But of course, medieval Christianity had the Inquisition and had these kinds of horrendous things done in God's name. In many ways, the Muslim majority world is going through that phase at the moment of reform against the kind of cruelty of the past.
Jonathan, did you want to come in there?
Yes, because I'm getting very worried now, because this was a programme which was about freedom of speech, and we had the Catholics and the atheists and the Muslims all attacking each other. You asked the question, who feels the most hurt, and we've had both the Islam and Christians saying, they've been the most reviled in history, or Jews could make their case. I think we all need to step back a bit, be a little bit less self-centred, a bit more altruistic. We all have our own hurts. What's really important is we don't make sure that we ricochet them against other people and become so self-defensive that we can't see the hurt that we're getting to other people. And what's fascinating about the Charlie Hebdo thing is that actually it has a very poor circulation. Only 60,000 normally. Most people ignore it. It has the right to ridicule, and other people have the right not to buy it, and that's probably the best way round.
Yes. So
I agree with that. I agree with that. But going back to one of your points, Rabbi, about the public expression of religion. Religion is clearly not purely private, because Judaism is very communal, as is Islam and Christianity and all the major world religions. It's that discussion around the nature of religion in the public space which is absolutely crucial to this debate.
I think I agree with Dr. Usama on that, and everybody who's holding these Je suis Charlie sort of posters and putting it on Twitter. It'd be interesting to see when it becomes an issue of faith in the public square. Everybody is for freedom at this moment to mock religion, and you're right, it was only 60,000 copies in circulation. But when it comes to religion, will people stand up and say, because neutrality is a myth, everybody has a worldview, everybody's bringing something into the public square. People of religion are just more obvious in what they're doing, and so we do need the freedom to say, look, God has a plan, I believe in that. But what we probably don't do is actually use our freedoms enough, because we all have incredible freedoms within the UK, and very few of us will find that we're having those impinged upon. So my challenge would be to use them more.
One step further and say, actually, other people have a right to mock me and mock my beliefs. And until we actually have that humility, then we're always going to be at war with each other.
Well, I think I probably have surprised most Christians listening to this programme to say I don't believe I have no objection to a blasphemy law in Northern Ireland being abolished. That would not probably be the majority position, but actually I think there's no need for something like that to stay in place, and we have always sought freedom for the other. It's not to protect ourselves. Most of what Christians campaign for is freedom on behalf of the unborn child or the trafficked person, not freedom to protect ourselves. So I'm entirely in agreement there, and by saying something like I don't think blasphemy laws are necessary anymore, I think I'm articulating that very publicly.
I think the key is that
Michael,
we should respect,
final word from you.
Yeah, we should respect each other's right to hold whatever beliefs we have, and the only way to respect equally everybody's right to hold their own beliefs and to manifest their beliefs insofar as they don't infringe on other people's human rights is for the state to remain neutral. So if the state is neutral between all religions and atheism, then individuals can hold their beliefs and manifest them without infringing on others' rights.
Neutral. It already is. There's a separation already in place.
OK, we will leave it there, but thank you all very much indeed for taking part in our discussion this morning. Dr. Usama Hassan from the think tank Quilliam, Rabbi Jonathan Romain, Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland, and Peter Lynas from the Evangelical Alliance. You can tell us what you think on this subject. Our text number is 81771, or you can tweet me at Audrey Carville. It's 9:30.